Adrian Newey has won 26 World Championships total across 3 different teams, and honestly, no other designer in Formula One history even comes close to that. Adrian Newey just showed off a car that's so wild, the FIA is already scratching their heads trying to decide if some parts are actually allowed or not. Nothing else on the 2026 grid looks anything like the AMR26. The rear suspension pieces double as things that create downforce. The side pods are hardly even noticeable. And when rival team bosses saw it roll out at Barcelona on January 29th, one of them said Newey had put wishbones in places where they really don't belong. The part that should make Aston Martin fans nervous is the timing. Newey started this whole project 4 months later than every other team, only ran 65 laps at Barcelona, which is fewer than the brand new team Cadillac, and the Honda engine on the back hasn't even done one real competitive lap yet. So either this is the gutsiest design move in modern F1, or it's a huge £150 million mistake. To get why the AMR26 is such a big deal, you have to know about the history behind it, because Newey has pulled tricks like this before, and every single time the FIA had to change the rules because of him. It all starts back in 1992. Newey designed the Williams FW14B with active suspension, traction control, and a semi-automatic gearbox, and that car won 10 out of 16 races. The FIA's answer was to ban all 3 of those things the next season, not because they were unsafe, but just because one guy figured out how to use them way better than everyone else. That was the first time the rule makers flipped everything because of Adrian Newey. It definitely wouldn't be the last. Then at McLaren, his MP420 in 2005 won 10 races, which was more than the team that actually won the championship, Renault. A lot of people in the paddock still think it was the fastest car Newey ever made. Both championships slipped away because of mechanical problems, not because it was slow. Red Bull is where things got really unstoppable. The RB6, RB7, RB8, RB9, 4 straight constructors' titles from 2010 to 2013, and every one of those cars pushed some rule right to the limit. Exhaust-blown diffusers on the RB7 sent hot exhaust gases over the rear diffuser to make extra downforce. The FIA limited that for 2012. Newey found another way around it and kept winning. Red Bull's front wings got checked over and over for being too bendy illegally, so the FIA made the deflection tests stricter multiple times. Newey kept passing them, but still got more aero help than anyone else could. By 2014, even the mandatory onboard camera turned into an aero trick. Newey built it right into the nose for an advantage no one else saw. And the FIA banned that too, making Red Bull change their car right in the middle of the season. 21 wins out of 22 races. That was the RB19 in 2023, a 95.5% win rate that smashed the old record from the McLaren MP44 in 1988. The car Ayrton Senna drove, the RB19 made the whole season feel predictable, and still no team on the grid could copy it properly. 12 Constructors' Championships, 14 Drivers' Championships, over 223 Grand Prix wins. Newey is the only designer in F1 history to win Constructors' titles with 3 totally different teams: Williams, McLaren, and Red Bull. Every one of those numbers comes from the same drawing board. A record like that is why the whole sport freaked out when Newey left Red Bull, and the way he left explains exactly why the AMR26 even exists. The whole thing came together over the 2024 Japanese Grand Prix weekend in April. The Christian Horner misconduct investigation had messed up the vibe inside Red Bull, and the death of founder Dietrich Mateschitz back in October 2022, who had always protected Newey's setup, took away the one connection keeping him there. Power fights between Red Bull's Thai and Austrian owners were getting worse. Newey wanted to leave. Red Bull officially announced it on May 1, 2024, right before the Miami Grand Prix. Car design work stopped right away, and Newey spent about 10 months on gardening leave, finishing the RB17 hypercar. Ferrari chased him really hard, with talks getting serious, but team principal Fred Vasseur wouldn't give him the freedom Newey wanted. Vasseur said straight up that Newey's idea of his own job didn't match what Ferrari planned. Ferrari wanted a designer who fit into their system. Newey wanted to change the whole system. Aston Martin gave him both. Lawrence Stroll announced the deal on September 10, 2024, at a special event at the AMR Technology Campus. And the money showed how much they wanted him. $30 million a year including bonuses on a 5-year contract worth about $150 million total. The thing that made Aston Martin different from everyone else was an equity stake, around 2.5%. Ownership in an F1 team was something no one had ever offered Newey before. Not Williams, not McLaren, not Red Bull. Newey called Stroll the only really active team owner in modern F1. And the factory being in England instead of Maranello didn't hurt, since Newey has never wanted to move overseas. Work started officially on March 1st, 2025, and by November that year, his job had already grown. Newey became team principal too, his first time with that title after more than 30 years in the sport, taking over from Andy Cowell, who moved to Chief Strategy Officer. Every team Newey has joined gets the same thing. A way of thinking that pushes rules right to the edge of what's okay, not breaking them, but finding the little gaps between what the rules say and what the people who wrote them really meant. The FIA has about 3 aerodynamicists on staff. The 10 F1 teams together have around 800. That difference has helped Newey his whole career. The AMR26 shows he still thinks the same way. Bare carbon fiber showed up at Barcelona, and the rear suspension took over every tech talk. Newey put the upper wishbone super high and connected its trailing arm straight to the rear wing support pylons, so the suspension parts themselves make downforce, doing exactly what the band rear beam wing used to do. A former Aston Martin strategist called it Newey, forcing the mechanical parts into spots other designers would never touch, giving up good suspension setup for better aero. And yeah, it's the most Newey thing ever. This is the same trick he used with exhaust-blown diffusers on the RB7, using the blurry line between a structural piece and an aero surface. The FIA cut diffusers for 2012, and Newey just found the next gap. Thin, short side pods make a huge undercut that creates what people call a double floor effect, with a big open space between the side pod bottom and the real floor. The cooling inlet has an underbite style where the lower lip sticks out past the upper one, basically turning the inlet into another aero part. A wide nose with a hollowed-out pelican belly runs the whole length of the car, and a triangular airbox with little horns reminds people of his old McLaren days. The whole car has a really high rake angle, rear much higher than the front, and that's the idea that made Red Bull unbeatable from 2010 to 2023. No other team on the 2026 grid went this extreme with rake. Newey talked about his design in his usual chill way, saying he never sees any of his cars as aggressive and he just follows whatever path feels right. He admitted the AMR26 has quite a few things that haven't really been done before, and the team picked development room over being perfect on day one. A car that can keep getting better, not one that's maxed out at launch and then stops improving. Floor edge cuts show the same thing. The AMR26 has more 45°-degree cuts along the floor than anyone else, a way to handle the messy air from the rear tires. Up front, the pushrod suspension puts the upper wishbone as high as the chassis lets it, opening up aero paths under the car that other teams left alone. And here's the quote that really hit the paddock hard. Newey said, "The AMR26 that races in Melbourne will look very different from what appeared at Barcelona," calling the shakedown version basically a test mule, just proof that the real race car is still getting worked on. That tells 2 things right away: how much the project was behind and how sure Newey is about the basic idea. Red Bull's 2022 season did exactly this. The RB18 started behind Ferrari, got quicker every race while Ferrari's updates stopped, and by the end, Max Verstappen had the title locked. Newey is doing the same plan at Aston Martin, just with bigger risks and less room to mess up. The smaller room comes from how massive the 2026 rule changes are, the biggest ever in the sport, and the first time chassis and power unit rules got rewritten at the same time. Active front and rear wings replace DRS completely, with the rear wing switching between high downforce for corners and low drag for straights, while the front wing changes automatically through engine settings. Unlike DRS, every driver gets active aero on any straight longer than about 3 seconds, no matter how close the car in front is. Power unit changes are just as big. They took out the MGUH, and MGUK output almost triples from $120 kilo to $350 kilo, making power about 50-50 between gas engine and electric instead of 80-20 now. Every car uses 100% sustainable carbon-neutral fuel, and a new boost button gives drivers an extra half megajoule of energy when they're within 1 second of the car ahead. The cars get smaller, 200 mm shorter wheelbase, 100 mm narrower, 30 kg lighter down to 768 kilos minimum weight. The FIA wants about 30% less downforce and 55% less drag. The FIA's single-seater technical director said the power unit, especially the combustion engine, will be the biggest thing deciding who wins in 2026. Think about that for a sec. It means aero differences between cars should be smaller overall. So any designer who finds an aero edge in rules meant to shrink those edges gets a much bigger advantage. That's exactly the kind of setup where Newey has always crushed it for 30 years. All that rule chaos hits Aston Martin while they're also switching from 17 straight years of Mercedes engines to the new Honda R626H works engine. Honda announced the deal back on May 24, 2023, but comments Newey made to Martin Brundle say Honda joined the 2026 rules later than other makers and spent the first year or more catching up. The McLaren-Honda years from 2015 to 2017, 3 full seasons of total engine disasters, are still the biggest warning about what happens when a manufacturer comes back to F1 with a fresh power unit. Another engine fight makes things even messier. Mercedes and Red Bull seem to have found a way to use thermal expansion in the engine block for effective compression ratios of 17 to 18.1 while still meeting the 16.1 limit when measured cold. That could give 10 to 13 extra QW, about 2 to 3 tenths per lap. Ferrari, Audi, and Honda sent a joint letter asking the FIA to decide, and the FIA shot back that they don't want the winner decided by who found the smartest rule twist. The final call still isn't out, and engine designs freeze on March 1, 2026. If that compression trick stays legal, Honda and Aston Martin start with a clear power disadvantage. Funny side note, it's kind of ironic that Newey, the king of finding rule gray areas in F1 history, is now stuck on the bad side of someone else's trick. Newey has been straight about the development delay. Aston Martin's wind tunnel at the 37,000-meter AMR technology campus, which cost about $200 million, didn't fully work until April 2025. The first 2026 aero model didn't go in until mid-April. While every other team had models running from January 1st, 4 months less time meant Aston Martin only got 65 laps over 2 days at Barcelona, the fewest of any team, even including new kid Cadillac. Mercedes did over 500 laps in the same test. Team changes make it worse. 3 different team principals in 3 years, first Mike Crack, then Andy Cowell, and now Newey himself, who's never done that job in over 30 years. Enrico Cardilla came from Ferrari as chief technical officer after a year of gardening leave and court stuff, and the whole leadership got shuffled around him. People inside say it's a big culture shock with Newey's tough style, and Christian Horner's 2021 warning feels more real now than just a random comment. Horner said there was no point in Newey trying to manage a bunch of people because it would be total chaos. Newey has always been the idea guy, never the boss organizing everyone. Now he's trying to do both. F1's cost cap adds a limit Newey never had during his best times. About $215 million for 2026 means one person's genius can't spend its way out like at uncapped Williams or Red Bull. Fred Vasseur at Ferrari summed up what a lot of people think. It's not one person who changes a team. The group is always stronger than any individual. 8 podiums in 2023, 0 in 2024, and 0 again in 2025. That's the path Aston Martin brings into a season where everything flips. Only 24% of fans think the team can fight for a championship, and 47% say maybe some podiums at best. Not awesome. But brushing off Newey just because of slow early testing is the exact mistake everyone has made before. Stroll paid $90 million for this team in 2018, and now it's worth about $2.4 billion. The AMR Technology Campus is the first new purpose-built F1 factory since McLaren's in 2004. The on-site wind tunnel, once the team's biggest problem, is now the newest and best in F1. Christian Horner once called Red Bull's tunnel a Cold War leftover. Aston Martin doesn't have that issue anymore, and the team grew from about 400 people to over 700. The talent lineup tells its own story. Newey designing, Cardile running chassis work, Cowell handling Honda and Aramco stuff, and Fernando Alonso in the car, with 23 years of experience and more race starts than any driver ever. Lance Stroll drives next to him with full support from the team owner Dad. The history is the biggest clue of all. In the last 3 big rule changes where Newey was involved, he made the championship-winning car at McLaren in 1998, at Red Bull in 2010, and at Red Bull again in 2022. Big regulation resets are when Newey gets really scary, because everyone else guesses while he starts from basic principles. The rear suspension idea on the AMR26 isn't wild just to look cool. It fixes a real problem from the 2026 rules, the loss of the rear beam wing, in a way no other team tried. When about 3 FIA aero guys are checking the work of roughly 800 across the 10 teams, the numbers have always helped the person who sees the gray area first. And Newey has been that guy for over 30 years. Melbourne comes March 6th through 8th, 2026. Less than 5 weeks away now, 26 world titles across 3 teams and 3 decades. The biggest non-driver contract the sport has ever given. Over £200 million in new facilities that didn't exist 3 years ago. A Honda engine that hasn't raced on its own since 2021. A car design so different, that even friendly experts call it a big risk. 26 is the number that started this whole thing, and whether it hits 27 depends on something no wind tunnel, no computer sim, and no money can figure out. Whether Adrian Newey has read the 2026 rules better than every other designer on the grid. Again,